Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Business Narrative. As I promised that I will be going to invite people from around the world from different niches to help you guys to give like a guideline to all of you, to all the viewers who are watching us. So today we have a cybersecurity expert. With that, he has written almost 500 plus articles in different international forums. He is none other than Joseph Steinberg. Joseph, thank you so much for your precious time.
Thank you for having me.
The pleasure is all mine. So let's start conversation from here. Like in modern era, why is it important for modern entrepreneurs to pivot their strategies when market changes? Because you are the one who previously worked with numerous businesses and you have seen their growth.
The whole world requires pivoting to survive. If you think about Darwin's theory of evolution, it wasn't the strongest that survive or the biggest. In fact, many cases it's the smallest. It's those that adapt the best to changing circumstances. And the same is true in the world of business. We live in a very, very fast changing world. If you look at AI, for example, and how much AI is used today versus just 5 years ago, right? You're talking about a very different world. Change is rapid and change is large. And so if you're not adapting and you're trying to operate things the way that they ran in a essentially previous world, a previous culture, a previous situation, you're not going to survive when you're competing with people who are operating and businesses that are operating for today's world. Change is not something we can stop. It gets faster and it gets bigger, larger, whatever you want to call it. And so if you can adapt and not just survive, but find a way to thrive with change, you stand a much better chance of being successful than if you build something highly successful and don't change as the world changes.
So on the other side, you are a tech guy as well, and you can answer this question in a very like a good manner, right? So do you think in near future technology will replace human workers, and why is it important for modern entrepreneurs to stay updated with technology and latest trends? According to you, what is your take on it?
First of all, I don't believe that AI will completely replace humans. We've heard this argument made many times, right? When the whole computer age began, there were many who said, well, computers will take away all the jobs. In fact, they ended up creating many more jobs. If you think about how many jobs today exist because there are computers and computing devices, it's an astronomical number of jobs. There are jobs that will disappear. If you have certain things that are automated, you don't need certain functions. Going back to the 1960s in the United States, there were many executives who didn't use typewriters. They had other people type their letters. Today, you'd be challenged to find people who have not used a keyboard on a computer. The number is tiny, right? Or used a keyboard on a phone. That has changed. In fact, you can't find typewriters. That would be an example of something that you had companies that dominated the entire market, but the market disappeared because change took place, right? If you think about videos in the United States, how many Blockbuster stores there were to rent videos and how many Blockbuster stores there are now. I think it's one, right? Which is left for old time's sake, and they do other things, right? The world changes very rapidly as technology makes things less expensive and more convenient, as well as when it enables new things. And so if you're in a business, let's say you're the dominant player in typewriters, but computers are starting to come out and people are starting to use word processors, you face a choice. You can keep trying to make typewriters better and better, or you can realize that this isn't a quantitative change, it's a qualitative change. The product that's going to be used is going to be something different. I talk about this actually in my first class every semester that I teach at Columbia. And the example that I give is horses. If you went back 130 years in New York City, the number of horses that were around was very, very large. It was many tens of thousands. If you look at how many people are riding horses to get place to place in New York City, it's very small, right? You can't Uber a horse, right? You can't go and just go get a horse. There's no places for buying horse food, and there's not places to clean up after them, right? It doesn't exist. Why is that? Because we replaced the horse with motor vehicles that have so many advantages. And it is true that at the time that the horse was being replaced, there were those who said the cars won't work, right? The horseless carriage won't work. They're dangerous. They have gasoline in them that could explode. If you fall asleep, you could crash. Horses won't crash if you fall asleep. But we came up with ways of addressing those because the change was inevitable. The benefits of the motor vehicle were too great to say, all right, we're not going to do it. Instead, we found a way to do it. So, for example, if your grandfather taught you how to ride a horse, you could ride a horse. If your grandfather teaches you how to drive, you still need to get a driving license, right? You have to stop at red lights. You have to use turn signals. There are speed limits. There are certain safety features in a car, like seatbelts that you have to wear. So we came up with laws and technologies to address the shortcomings in order to make the technology able to be used essentially to a level of safety that was tolerable. That's true for AI. That's true for everything, right? AI is not going to go away because there's issues with it. AI is not going to go away because there's potential danger. We're going to find ways to address those to a sufficient degree to make everything safe enough that organizations will use it. Now, does that mean that going into a public AI is a good idea if you're handling highly sensitive data? Probably not. But there will be, and there are already, private AI versions you can run where it's local and the data is not being shared out to the public. And there'll be other things that will develop that will address the security issues and the danger issues. So if you're not pivoting, if your attitude is, hey, I'm not going to use AI because I think it's dangerous, you're not going to survive. You're going to be competing with parties that are far more efficient than you, and they're going to win all your business.
I am very furious and curious because technology is evolving very faster than even before, right? And what do you think? Which jobs will going to be replaced by AI in near future?
So it's true, the speed of change is increasing. And in some ways, the quality of the work is going down as a result. Products are rushed to market because everybody wants to get out quickly, and new versions of things are constantly being updated. Some of that is enabled by technology, right? If I was going back, let's say 40 years, and every update to a computer, even to software, required sending out a floppy disk to everybody who's going to update it, that takes time. If I'm going, and money, right? There's a cost to that. If I'm running an app and I update my server and it pushes down the version of the app, or I put it in the app store and it pushes it down, it's very easy to do updates on a regular basis. So rather than having, one new version come out a year or two new versions a year, I can be having many, and each time I test a new feature, theoretically, I can push it out. So that's one issue of change that has changed the way change happens. The other issue is that there's many more parties developing technology than there were, 40, 50 years ago. 40, 50 years ago, many of the countries that are technologically sophisticated now were not technologically sophisticated. Many of the countries that are relatively free now were not free. I mean, if you think about the size of the former Soviet Union and how much of Eastern Europe they occupied, and obviously in communist societies were not promoting the development of new civilian technologies to sell. So you had a very different kind of situation. You now have orders of magnitude more people around the world who can produce technology and who can market it to the whole world because of the internet and the connectivity. So someone in Asia can create an app and someone in the US can download it 30 seconds after it goes live in the App Store. That wasn't possible, wasn't even in some ways dreamable for people 30, 40 years ago. So that's one thing that's accelerated change. The flip side of that is that quality has gone down. If you know that you have a year to produce a version of software, you can do a lot more QA testing than you can if you're trying to get it out as quickly as possible. If you think about it, we would never tolerate most products needing updates and patches on a regular basis. If you bought a car and they told you, it's dangerous to drive unless you update it every 2 weeks, that would never go, right? You'd never buy it. Governments would be upset about it, etc. But with software, we've allowed that. And that's in some ways allowing that has accelerated the pace of advancement at the cost of cybersecurity and quality. In terms of, you also asked me about jobs that could disappear. So first of all, I should say that often when we predict which jobs will disappear, we miss things because we don't understand the implications of certain technological developments, nor do we know what developments will occur within the time period we're talking about. So, if you had asked 5 years ago what technology would look like today, some of the things were predictable, but I don't think most people would have predicted that AI, generative AI especially, would be at the stage that it's at, and not just technologically, but in terms of the mass deployment of it and the mass usage of it, as much as it has become in a very short period of time. So, when we talk about predicting which jobs, we're assuming that we can predict what's going to happen over the next few years. I do think certain areas are clear. And I don't know if it's 5 years or 10 years, but for example, in the United States, we have a very large trucking industry. It's a large country, and we often have products delivered to the coasts from outside, and the U.S. imports a lot, and we use trucks to get them across in many cases. That industry has a lot of drivers. And one of the things I worry about, and I've been speaking about this probably for over a decade since we're talking about self-driving cars, is what about the self-driving trucks? Because the return on investment for a company that's transporting goods across the United States to replace a well-paid driver who can drive at most, let's say, 16 hours a day, because they have to sleep, they have to eat, they have to go to the bathroom, there are safety regulations, how much they can drive. If they replace that person with a machine that can go 24 hours a day at a lower cost, even if there's initial investment up front, you've got something that's 50% more efficient at a lower cost. It's going to be impossible for the companies that rely on humans to compete with the companies using self-driving trucks. So I don't know how long that will take, but I do think that that is a major threat, because there are millions of people in the US whose incomes are tied to the long distance trucking industry, all the rest stops along the highways, etc. And as we said with quality, trucking doesn't have to be perfect to do that. Even if only going across the country is done by machine, and the deliveries within the cities are still being done by humans, for example, or vice versa, it would save these companies that are doing trucking a lot of money. And so I do worry that that would be one area of jobs that could be decimated. And those aren't jobs that you can easily convert over, for example, to someone who's developing AI software. And again, some people say that's kind of out of the box, because typically when we talk about which jobs disappear, people think about technology jobs and the like, but a lot of them are going to have nothing to do with, quote unquote, technology. There are areas that are affected by technology, and areas that we have very large numbers of people, working in. And those would be my concerns. I don't think, for example, plumbers are going to be replaced very quickly, but things where the tasks can be learned and they're similar each time, and the algorithms can address the danger and the efficiency, I think we're going to see replacements.
40 to 50% entrepreneurs in IT sector or in software development industry, they always focused on technical skills, but they always neglect soft skills. And in soft skills, communication skill is the most important one. So why this skill is so important for entrepreneurs and for their teams, and on the other side, technical entrepreneurs, how they can master the art of communication.
If you think about communication as a concept, that's really what sets us as humans apart from animals, or one of the major areas that we are separated from animals. We can communicate complex concepts. One generation can communicate its knowledge that it has learned to the next generation, and that generation can add and communicate it to the following generation. Communication is how humans convey information and feelings in many cases. So if you're an entrepreneur and you've got a business and you can't communicate the value of what you're doing, how is anybody going to know what you can do for them, right? In the end, people are not buying products or services because you've got a nice website. They're not buying products and services because it sounds cool. They're buying it because of what it does for them, right? It makes their business better. It makes them operate faster, more efficiently, at a lower cost. It makes them happier. They enjoy using it. It's about what it does for them. So if you cannot communicate that to somebody, it's going to be very hard to get them to want to expend resources, to spend time and money for your offering. So I think communication is critical in that area. And I also will add that AI right now is not great at that, because humans don't communicate in identical fashions. People around the world, they're different cultures and they communicate differently. If you look in the United States itself, people in New York communicate very differently than people in Texas, right? There are many different cultures. You go through any large country, there's going to be different cultures in different areas. AIs at this point can't really read a person and communicate the way that is ideal for that person. Will they get there? I'm sure they will. But the soft skill of communication is still going to be much harder for a machine to do at an appropriate level than for humans to do, at least for the time being. But even when AIs can do this and they can help you craft your messaging already, you still need to deliver the message, because people buy from people, right, in the end. So you got to be able to communicate, and spending time focusing on communication skills is a generally good investment for entrepreneurs. As you said, many entrepreneurs tend to be experts at a particular niche, right? Whatever that may be. In my field, it may be cybersecurity, right? This person's an expert at authentication and makes an authentication product. Engineers could be very good at something and they come up with a great way of doing something faster, more efficiently, lower cost, what have you, but they're not necessarily trained on communication. Those are typically going to be people who've studied marketing. And so, or the like, or advertising, etc. So if you've got an engineer who's got a great product, but they don't either work with someone who can communicate or themselves know how to communicate, you're going to find many great products sitting on shelves, never used and never being sold. If you look at modern history of technological advancements, it parallels what Darwin said. It's not always the best product that wins, right? If you look back, this is going back a couple generations, the technology of the Sony Betamax, according to many, was better than VHS. But the whole world adopted the videotapes of the VHS, not the Betamax. Right? How did that happen? Right? A lot of that had to do with making things easier, communication, etc. It didn't have to do with who had the best product. And that is often the case. And that is why communication of value is so important.
In my introduction, I mentioned that you are a cybersecurity expert as well. So, do let me know, what does it mean when I say ethical hacking? What it means, and on the other side, on platforms like social media, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, the question is, our data is safe, and when should we encrypt our data?
So when it comes to cybersecurity, there's no one answer of what to do for everybody and every piece of data. You have to think about what the risk is of a particular piece of data going out. If you have sensitive things, sensitive pictures, sensitive information, and you would not be happy if that information made it out to the public, then yeah, you're going to want to encrypt it and possibly even keep it on machines that aren't connected to the internet. If you think about militaries, so for example, in the United States, classified networks cannot be connected to the internet by law. Right? That doesn't matter how secure you make it or how many firewalls you put, you just don't do it. Right? There are mechanisms that make things more secure at the cost of usability or convenience. If something's not connected to the internet, it's less convenient to access remotely. But if you're very worried about security, not being able to access it remotely is a good thing. So I would say the same thing for people. Think about what you have. If you have a picture that you took of sunset and you don't mind if people see it and if people copy it, then there's no reason to encrypt it or to protect it, but post it online. But if you're going on vacation, and flying halfway around the world, don't post that online until you're back, because you're telling people that your home is empty, and that could lead to criminals targeting you. Think about it, right? All of this boils down to one concept. If you believe that you're a potential target, you're going to act differently than if you don't. And I'm telling you, you're a potential target. regardless of who you are. Everybody's got something that a criminal wants. And if you realize that you're a target, so you may think a little bit more, right? Instead of just doing, hey, I took this cool picture on vacation, let me post it. You think for a second, hey, is posting this going to put me in danger at all? Put my family in danger, etc. Could it lead to financial danger? So if you do that, you don't have to be paranoid. If you just think for a moment, hey, what could this do? Maybe I should wait to post it till I'm back. Maybe I shouldn't post this picture of my child at their school because I don't need to tell the whole world where my child goes to school, etc. So if you think like that, you'll be much more safe in general. You'll do less stupid things essentially.
Thank you so much for explaining such a critical topic, and mostly people they don't know about ethical hacking. So thank you so much for your kind answer. So lastly, before we wrap up, do let me know if you get a chance, hypothetically, to give one advice to your younger self. What message you will give to yourself?
Hmm, that's a very good question. Um, well, I'll answer that from the perspective of profession. One of the things that I would love to be able to tell myself, earlier in my career, is take the chances. Go for it. Many entrepreneurs, especially in their first business, are worried. They have what we call imposter syndrome. They don't feel like, hey, I'm not really a CEO. Like, who am I to do this? If nobody's doing this already, then they're smarter than me. Then there must be a reason they're not doing it, so I shouldn't do it. Don't listen to that. Every great business person who has ever lived started as a child, right? Nobody was born knowing everything. Nobody was born successful. And every product that's ever come out, when it was invented, and every service that's ever come out, when it was invented, there was someone who thought of it first. So why can't it be you, right? If you thought of something interesting and you think it's something that has a market, don't just dismiss the idea. Think about it, look into it. That's number one. The second thing I would say is don't be afraid to fail. And I think this is a really big one. A lot of people, and I've seen this, especially outside the US, I've seen this more than in the US, think there's a shame associated with starting a business and it not succeeding. There isn't. And the reality is that most, if not all, successful people have had businesses that have failed. If you look at VCs, most of the companies that they invest in fail, right? Even very good VCs, that have made a lot of money. It's about, hitting the home run, doing really well on the ones that are successful. And if you're learning from the failure in a way that helps you make the next effort more successful, then it's not necessarily a failure. It's a learning experience along the path to success. If you don't learn from your failures and you repeat the same mistakes, yeah, then that's a failure. But if it's not, so it was just an expensive way of learning a particular aspect of business that you didn't know and that you needed to know to become successful. As I said, some of the greatest business people that have, become famous for running businesses have also had businesses that have failed. If you look at Donald Trump, the president of the United States, right? He's well known as a businessman, billionaire. He's had multiple businesses that failed. But so what? He's also had multiple businesses that made a lot of money, right? Nobody questions that. And those businesses built him a reputation that, for better or for worse, the reality is he got elected president of the United States twice. The first one was based on his business acumen, right? He had no political career. So the fact that someone had businesses that failed didn't prevent them from being elected president of the United States. So keep that in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is that if you read the business news or you look at the regular news and they have stories of these businesses, right? This company raised an astronomical amount of money. This company sold for $10 billion. What you're not seeing is that most companies aren't in the news, but most companies are not doing that. The news is only going to report the big successes. So if 99% of companies in a particular sector fail and one succeeds, you're going to see the news about the one that succeeds. You're not seeing how many have failed. So keep that in mind. It's not like you're the, if you're having problems with business, it's not like you're the only one. The vast majority of businesses do not succeed, but the vast majority of entrepreneurs who keep trying will eventually achieve something that they're happy about.
Thank you so much for your precious time, and I hope all the viewers will going to love the podcast. If you love the podcast, do subscribe the channel, press the bell icon, and we will be going to meet you in another exciting episode. Till then, keep daring, keep listening, and keep achieving your goals.